Have you ever woken up and just known from the very first moment your eyes opened that today was going to be a good day? The air feels different, clearer. The gears in your mind are already turning, not with anxiety, but with a quiet, confident hum. You know what you need to do, and more importantly, you feel an unshakable certainty that you are going to do it. These are the days we live for. The days we write the chapter, run the extra mile, make the call, and go to bed feeling not just tired, but accomplished. But then there are the other days. The days when morning light feels like an accusation, where the gravity in your own bed feels 10 times stronger. On these days, the ambitious to-do list you wrote with such clarity the night before looks like a cruel joke, a set of demands written by a stranger who doesn't understand the fog you're in. Why? What is the invisible variable that separates these two versions of ourselves? It feels like a lottery, a coin flip that determines whether we get the focused, capable version of ourselves or the distracted, lethargic one. We try to brute force our way through it. We read productivity books. We download apps. We set reminders. We tell ourselves this time will be different. And for a little while, maybe it is, but then life happens. A stressful week at work, a sick child, an unexpected bill, and suddenly all of our carefully constructed systems crumble like sandcastles against the tide. We fall back to zero, feeling worse than when we started, because now we have the added weight of our own failure. This profound, frustrating, and deeply human question is what drove psychologist Chloe Reed to abandon a successful career and dedicate a decade of her life to a single obsession. She wasn't just interested in productivity hacks or morning routines. She was haunted by the chasm between our intentions and our actions. She saw it in her clients, in her friends, and most painfully, she saw it in herself. She wanted to find the source code for the kind of discipline that doesn't just work when you're motivated, but the kind that holds you steady when the storms arrive. She wanted to know how to build something truly unbreakable. And the journey to find that answer would take her to places she never expected, forcing her to tear down everything she thought she knew about willpower, motivation, and the very nature of human change. To understand the depth of Chloe Reed's breakthrough, you first have to understand the world she came from and the profound sense of failure that fueled her quest. On paper, Chloe was the epitome of success. A doctorate in clinical psychology, a thriving private practice, a waiting list of clients all eager to benefit from her expertise. She was the person people came to when their lives were unraveling, when they felt stuck in cycles of procrastination and self-sabotage. She would sit in her calm, tastefully decorated office, listening to their struggles, and dispense the accepted wisdom of her field. Cognitive behavioral therapy, goal-setting worksheets, mindfulness exercises. And for many, it seemed to work, at least for a while. They'd report back with small victories, a new gym habit established, a project finally started. But Chloe began to notice a disturbing pattern, a quiet epilogue to these success stories that her textbooks had never prepared her for. A few months down the line, a client would return, their shoulders slumped in that familiar posture of defeat. The gym habit had vanished after a nasty flu. The project was gathering dust after a demanding new boss took over their life. The progress they had made, which had felt so real and so solid, was revealed to be a fragile house of cards, toppled by the first gust of real-world adversity. They would look at her with a mixture of shame and desperation, asking the same question. What's wrong with me? And the most terrifying part for Chloe was that she didn't have a real answer. She felt like a fraud, a mechanic who was great at patching tires but had no idea how to actually build an engine. This professional dissonance was amplified by a deeply personal one. While she projected an image of control and order, her own life, outside the structured confines of her 9-to-5, felt chaotic. The novel she had been dreaming of writing for years existed only as a pristine, empty document on her laptop. Her intentions to eat healthier were consistently undone by late-night exhaustion and the siren song of takeout menus. She knew all the theories. She could lecture for hours on the dopamine feedback loops of habit formation, on breaking down goals into manageable steps, on the psychology of motivation. Yet, knowing the theory and living the reality were two entirely different things. The breaking point, the moment her quiet frustration boiled over into a full-blown crisis of faith, came not in her office, but in the sterile quiet of a university library. She had been given a prestigious opportunity to contribute a chapter to a major psychological text, a capstone to her academic career. She had months to do it. She had the knowledge. She had the passion. But she didn't do it. She procrastinated. She did research that was really just aimless web surfing. She organized her desk, answered unimportant emails, did everything and anything except the one thing that mattered most. The deadline came and went in a blur of panic and self-loathing. The shame was suffocating. Here she was, an expert in human behavior, utterly incapable of managing her own. That failure wasn't just a missed opportunity. It was a verdict. It told her that the entire framework she operated within was flawed. Willpower wasn't enough. Motivation was a fickle friend. The tools she had been giving her clients, the tools she had tried to use on herself, were designed for a perfect world that didn't exist. She realized then that she had to start over. She had to throw out the textbooks and go find the people for whom discipline wasn't a theory, but a matter of survival. She had to understand not how habits are formed in a lab, but how they endure in the messy, unpredictable, and often brutal reality of life. Her new research began not with academic journals, but with people. She sought out individuals who displayed a quiet, relentless consistency in their pursuits, not for a week or a month, but for years, even decades. She interviewed professional violinists, marathon runners, coders who built entire worlds of software from their basements, and entrepreneurs who had weathered multiple economic downturns. She went in expecting to hear stories of superhuman grit and ironclad self-control, of people who simply forced themselves to do the work, day in and day out. What she found was something far more subtle and infinitely more powerful. The first pattern emerged from a story that, on the surface, seemed like a failure. She was speaking with a man named Leo, a brilliant jazz musician who had almost abandoned his craft entirely. He described a period of his life where he was paralyzed by a creative block so profound that the very sight of his trumpet filled him with a cold dread. He knew he should practice for hours a day, compose, transcribe solos, but the sheer scale of that expectation was a mountain he couldn't even begin to climb. Every day he failed to meet this impossibly high bar. The narrative of his own failure grew stronger until he was convinced he had simply lost it. He went to a mentor, an older, seasoned musician, expecting to be told to suck it up and get back in the woodshed. Instead, the old man gave him a bizarre instruction. He said, "For the next month, I forbid you from practicing. I forbid you from composing. All I want you to do, every single day, is take your trumpet out of its case and polish one valve. Then you put away." Leo thought it was absurd, but he was desperate, so he agreed. The first few days, it felt pointless, almost insulting. But a strange thing began to happen. The act of taking the trumpet out, of touching the cool metal, of performing this one, tiny, non-threatening ritual, started to change his relationship with the instrument. It was no longer a monument to his failure. It was just a thing he touched for 30 seconds a day. There was no pressure. There was no expectation. And because there was no expectation, there was no fear. One day, after polishing the valve, he found himself holding the trumpet for a moment longer. He blew a single note. It sounded okay. The next day, he played a simple scale. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the simple, non-negotiable act of polishing one valve became a gentle gateway back into the world of music. This was the moment Chloe Reed first conceptualized what she would call the anchor habit. She realized the most resilient people she studied didn't start by trying to build a dozen new, massive habits. They started by identifying one and only one ridiculously small action that was so easy it was almost impossible not to do. One interviewee, a novelist, committed to writing just a single sentence each day. Another, a fitness enthusiast who had lost over 100 pounds, started by simply putting on his running shoes and standing on his front porch for 1 minute every morning. The power of the anchor habit wasn't in the act itself. Polishing a valve doesn't make you a better musician. Writing one sentence doesn't finish a novel. Its power was psychological. It was about making and keeping a single, unbreakable promise to yourself. In a life filled with chaos and broken commitments, the anchor habit is the one thing you control, the one daily piece of evidence that you are someone who follows through. It recalibrates your self-image from I am someone who quits to I am someone who, at the very least, always does this one thing. This single, daily act of integrity creates a cascade of positive momentum, quietly rebuilding the trust you have in yourself, which, as Chloe was beginning to realize, was a real foundation of all discipline. For a time, Chloe believed the anchor habit was a complete answer. It was elegant, simple, and the results she saw when she began testing it with a small group of volunteers were astonishing. People who hadn't exercised in years were suddenly going to gym consistently, all because they started with an anchor of just doing 5 push-ups at home. Writers were breaking through blocks. Entrepreneurs were tackling daunting projects, all by focusing on a single, minuscule daily promise. The principle seemed robust. But a good story and good science is always complicated by reality. The complication arrived in an email from one of her most successful case studies, a woman named Sarah who would use a 5-minute daily tidying anchor to completely transform her chronically cluttered home and, by extension, her sense of calm and control. The email was short and distressing. Sarah's father had been in a serious car accident. She had to fly to another state, was living out of a suitcase, and spending her days in a grim hospital waiting room. Her anchor habit, her entire routine, had been obliterated overnight. I feel like a total failure, she wrote. All that progress is gone. I'm right back where I started. Chloe felt a chill as she read the words. Sarah's story mirrored the relapses of her old therapy clients. The system worked beautifully in fair weather, but the first real hurricane of life had torn it to pieces. An anchor is useless if the ground beneath it gives way. She realized her theory was missing a critical component, a plan for chaos. This sent her on the second phase of her research, away from people who had built consistent lives and toward those who lived and thrived in environments of perpetual crisis. She interviewed ER doctors, battlefield medics, smoke jumpers, and CEOs who navigated corporate takeovers. These were people for whom predictable routine was an impossible luxury. Their lives were a constant stream of emergencies and disruptions. How did they maintain any semblance of discipline or personal well-being? The answer came during a series of interviews with a brilliant trauma surgeon named Dr. Anya Sharma. Chloe asked Sharma about her daily routines for managing the immense stress of her job. Sharma laughed. Routine? Some days I'm in surgery for 14 hours straight. There's no routine. But then she paused and said something that would change the course of Chloe's work forever. I don't have a routine, Sharma clarified, but I do have a protocol. I have my A day, my B day, and my C day. On an A day, a rare day off, she had a full routine, a long run, meditation, healthy cooking, reading. On a B day, a standard, busy day at the hospital, she had a stripped-down version, a 20-minute workout, 10 minutes of journaling. But the key, she explained, was the C day. This was a plan for the absolute worst days. The 24-hour shifts, the multiple patient losses, the days fueled by stale coffee and raw adrenaline. On a C day, her commitment to herself was brutally simple. She had to drink 1 full bottle of water. She had to stretch her back for 2 minutes. And before she finally collapsed into bed, she had to text her sister. That was it. That was the entirety of the plan. She explained that in the past, a day like that would have felt like a complete write-off, a total failure of self-care. This feeling of failure would then bleed into the next day, making it harder to get back on track. But by predefining victory on her worst day as drink water, stretch, text sister, she never had a zero day. She could end even the most brutal shift with a tiny, crucial sense of accomplishment. She hadn't failed. She had successfully executed her C-Day protocol. From this, Chloe developed her second core principle, the elasticity protocol. The goal of discipline isn't to create a rigid, unbreakable chain of perfect days. That's a fantasy. The goal is to create a system so flexible and resilient that it can be stretched to its absolute limit without snapping. It's about pre-planning for failure. It requires you to sit down when you are calm and rational and ask yourself, what does winning look like on my absolute worst day? What is the bare minimum I can do to honor my commitment to myself when I have zero energy, time, or motivation? Maybe it's 1 push-up. Maybe it's flossing 1 tooth. Maybe it's just opening the document for your novel and looking at it for 10 seconds. The elasticity protocol redefines a binary of success and failure. It introduces a compassionate, realistic middle ground, ensuring that even in the depths of crisis, you are never truly derailed. You're just operating on the emergency setting you cleverly designed for yourself. Chloe now had two powerful, seemingly distinct principles. The anchor habit, a method for building momentum from a dead stop, for forging self-trust in the calm. And the elasticity protocol, a method for preserving that trust during a storm. She presented them as two separate tools in a workshop, and they were effective, but she felt a nagging sense that she was still missing the final, unifying piece of the puzzle. The connection felt close, but it remained just out of reach. The aha moment, the grand synthesis, didn't happen in an interview or a library. It happened late one night in her own kitchen. She'd had a brutal week. A personal conflict had left her emotionally drained, and a looming deadline was causing her immense stress. It was a certified C day. Her own protocol called for her to simply wash her face and read one page of a book before bed. She was exhausted, and every fiber of her being wanted to just collapse onto the couch. But she walked to the bathroom and washed her face. She picked up the book and read a single page. And as she did, a profound sense of calm washed over her, a feeling entirely out of proportion to the tiny action she had just performed. She stood there in the quiet of her home and finally saw the whole picture. The anchor habit and the elasticity protocol were not two different ideas. They were the inhale and the exhale of a single living principle. They were the two core functions of a healthy relationship. And that was a key. Discipline was not a character trait, not a virtue, not a matter of grit or willpower. Unbreakable discipline is a relationship with yourself. The anchor habit is how you build the trust in that relationship. Every time you perform your tiny, non-negotiable action, you're sending a clear message to the deepest parts of your brain. I am reliable. When I make a promise to myself, I keep it. You can count on me. It's like making small, consistent deposits into a bank account of self-trust. Day by day, the balance grows. You are actively constructing a new identity based on evidence, not just hope. Then, when life inevitably throws a crisis at you, the job loss, the illness, the heartbreak, the elasticity protocol is how you protect that relationship. By executing your predefined minimums, you are saying to yourself, things are terrible right now, and I cannot function at full capacity, but I will not abandon you. I will not let you fall to zero. I will do this one small thing to honor the commitment we have. It prevents a crisis from wiping out your entire self-trust account. It ensures that even on your worst day, you don't break the relationship. You simply shift the terms of engagement to something manageable. This was the unifying theory that changed everything. The reason we fail isn't because we are weak or lazy. It's because we treat ourselves like a machine to be optimized rather than a person to be in a relationship with. We try to use force and shame, which are toxic to any relationship. The path to unbreakable discipline wasn't through a stronger whip, but through a deeper and more compassionate partnership with ourselves. It's not about being perfect. It's about being predictable to yourself. It's about building a foundation of self-trust so solid that you become your own most reliable ally, the one person you know will show up for you, especially when it matters most. So what does this journey, Chloe Reed's decade-long quest, mean for us right here, right now? It means we can stop fighting the wrong battle. The struggle for discipline is not an external war against distraction or an internal war against our own perceived laziness. It's a quiet, patient process of rebuilding a fractured relationship. The blueprint she discovered isn't a complicated piece of machinery. It's a profoundly human approach to change. It begins with one simple decision. First, you build the trust. You establish your anchor habit. Forget the grand ambitions for a moment. What is the one laughably small promise you can make to yourself and keep every single day without fail? Is it meditating for 1 minute? Is it putting one dish in the dishwasher? Is it writing 50 words? Choose something so small that your brain can't argue with it, and then do it. Every day. Let that be your single point of focus, the foundation upon which all future growth will be built. Second, you protect that trust. You design your elasticity protocol. Take out a piece of paper right now and define your victory on your worst possible day. When you're sick, grieving, or utterly overwhelmed, what is the absolute bare minimum you'll do to honor the person you want to become? Define it, write it down, and put it somewhere safe. This is your emergency plan, your unbreakable safety net. It's your promise to yourself that you will never be abandoned. This journey from confusion to clarity, from self-loathing to self-trust, is available to every single one of us. It doesn't require a mystical surge of motivation or a sudden personality transplant. It requires a small promise and a compassionate backup plan. Understanding this is a first, crucial step, but the real transformation happens when you move from understanding to action. It happens when you decide that you are worth the effort of building this relationship. If this idea resonates with you, if you feel that shift from seeing discipline as a punishment to seeing it as a partnership, then you're in the right place. By subscribing to this channel, you're not just clicking a button. You're joining a community of people who are committed to this journey, to leaving behind the cycles of shame and failure, and stepping into a new way of being. You are making a small, powerful commitment to yourself and to the future you are ready to build. Because in the end, the trust you build with yourself is the foundation for everything you will ever create in this world.